All right, let's get into this. You know how sometimes one single comment about one event can just set off a massive firestorm? It can reveal these huge cracks in how we think about faith, about mercy, and even about God. Today, we're going to break down a really powerful argument from an author that started with exactly that kind of controversy, and it led them to a pretty deep critique of modern spirituality. So here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the spark itself, a controversial blessing. Then we'll see how the author says this isn't really about mercy, but a major misunderstanding. We'll explore their idea of a God made to measure, look at a different vision of love that transforms, and see how that applies to church law. And we'll end with the author's big call to rediscover the sacred. So where did this all kick off? Well, it started when the author shared an opinion about a same-sex couple receiving sacraments. You know, those formal rites in the Catholic Church like communion. The reaction? It was immediate and it was fierce. The pushback came in hard and fast, with comments just like this one. Don't judge. You don't know their lives. You are not their confessor. You can just feel the emotion in that, right? It throws you right into the middle of the fight. But the author argues that underneath all that emotion, there's a much older, deeper accusation at play. And there it is. According to the author, the core accusation being thrown at them, and by extension the church, is that they just want to shut people out from God's love. The author calls this a really old, persistent falsehood, one that completely misses what the actual discussion is about. And that brings us to the real heart of their whole argument. This is where the whole thing pivots. The author says, look, this debate isn't actually about inclusion versus exclusion. Instead, they try to completely reframe the conversation around what they believe is a massive collective misunderstanding of something fundamental. Okay, this slide is absolutely key to understanding the author's entire point. On one side, you have the popular narrative. The church is being merciless and rejecting people. But the author says that's not the root problem. The real issue, in their view, is that we as a culture have lost our sense of God's holiness, his sacrality. So what does this loss of sacrality actually look like in practice? Well, the author claims that in our effort to be seen as good people by the world, we've ended up creating a version of God that's, well, more comfortable, more convenient, a God made in our image. And this is the God we tend to focus on, right? The God who welcomes, the God who forgives, the God who loves. And look, those are beautiful, comforting truths. They speak to something we all need. But the author's whole point is that this is only half the picture. And boom, here's the other side of the coin. The author argues that we've sort of pushed aside the God who also corrects us, who asks us to change, that's what conversion means, and a God who is also fundamentally just. By only talking about the first list, we create a God that's out of balance. And this quote just nails the author's main warning. They're saying that we're so focused on seeming merciful in a worldly way that we end up paying a huge price. We shrink God down to our size. And this comfortable God, they argue, isn't really a holy God anymore, which sets up a totally different idea of what divine love is. So if divine love isn't just about affirmation and making us feel good, what is it? The author points us to the way Jesus interacted with people in the Gospels. They argue that those encounters show a love that is incredibly welcoming, yes, but also incredibly transformative. The author sees a pattern, a three-step process. First, the encounter. Jesus welcomed absolutely everyone, no exceptions. But, and this is the crucial part, that meeting was always a turning point. It wasn't just a casual chat. It always led to the final step, conversion. The argument is that nobody who had a real encounter with him just went back to their old way of life unchanged. This quote really crystallizes the author's point. They're drawing a bright line between the modern idea of just accepting someone with a sort of passive, stay as you are, and what they see as Christ's more challenging, more active call to go and sin no more. For the author, that challenge isn't a rejection. It's what love that actually saves looks like. So the author is making a very clear distinction here. To them, real welcoming means walking alongside someone on their journey toward the truth. What it does not mean is giving a thumbs up to actions that the faith itself calls sin. This is the fine line they believe our culture has completely blurred. Okay, so that's the big picture theology. How does that connect back to the original fight over sacraments? Well, the author argues that the church isn't making up special rules. It's applying one single universal standard to everybody based on this idea of holiness. The entire argument really hangs on this one concept, the state of grace. As the author explains it, receiving a sacrament isn't like claiming a right you're owed. It's a sacred encounter with God that requires you to come with a prepared, purified heart. And they emphasize this isn't a special rule for any one group, it's a universal requirement for every single believer before receiving the Eucharist. And this is where the author calls out what they see as a major double standard. They claim that when a heterosexual person is reminded of this universal need for a state of grace, nobody bats an eye. It's just standard church teaching. But, they argue, when that exact same rule is mentioned to a homosexual person, suddenly it's framed as a scandal, as targeted discrimination. And the author is asking why the different reaction to the same rule. All of this leads us to the author's ultimate conclusion. It isn't really about rules in the end. It's a passionate call to get back something they believe we've lost, a sense of awe, a sense of reverence. Here, mercy gets a whole new definition. It's not just permissiveness, not a shrug that says anything goes. Instead, the author presents mercy as this active, powerful force, like a purifying fire that burns away what's broken to heal and restore us. This quote just brings the whole argument into sharp focus. For the author, if you claim to love someone but you're not willing to speak the truth even when it's hard to hear, well, that's not saving them. In their view, it's actually betraying them. And so the author leaves us with this final, really challenging question. It sums up their entire thesis. Are we trying to bend our faith to fit our own comfort and our modern ideas? Or are we allowing our faith to shape and transform us? It's a question that goes way beyond this one controversy and gets to the very heart of what it means to believe.